The witness shoved through bodies and grit as the condemned's shoulders met the rim of a steaming iron cauldron. The man on the block did not scream at first. His mouth opened and closed in a wet, shocked rhythm while soldiers tightened the ropes. Fear sat in the witness like a physical weight, making her palm slick against the notepad in her satchel. Around her, the crowd answered the ritual, a hush, a rustle, then the soft sound of a ledger falling open as someone checked a list. She had come that dusk to see only the order of the day, taxes paid, proclamations read, not a public death stage to teach obedience. The central problem was visible in the first ring. The state had turned pain into instruction. The witness had kept her distance, but she could see the executioner's hands, broad and stained, delivering the condemned against the iron lip. The first 5 minutes clarified everything. The Empire used spectacle to erase questions. That fact, not a theory, would drive her choices for the rest of the night. The cauldron hissed as the condemned was eased toward immersion. The executioner ran a gloved hand down a long iron ladle and kept his eyes fixed on the Emperor's raised dais. He did not look at the crowd. He worked with the precision of someone who measured minutes and oil temperatures the way other men measured grain. The witness watched his hands more than his face. Oil darkened the executioner's gloves at the fingertips. That detail lodged in her mind as proof this was practiced cruelty, not a chaotic massacre. A soldier at the perimeter barked an order, move back. He shouted a woman by the post, step aside. The witness did not step. Soldiers grabbed a relative of the condemned and hauled him forward to the rope, dragging the man's arms until skin flared. The Emperor's aides handed out terse directives from a clipboard, names to arrest, houses to search, tongues to silence. The witness recorded every name she heard, fingers tracing the oilcloth around her notepad. Her breathing shortened. Fear shifted to a cold suspicion. This spectacle was obeying a plan. She slipped away after the crowd was herded into narrow lanes. The square emptied faster than she expected. Lanterns winked out at the edges. A clerk with a ledger stamped orders, while another carried sealed writs wrapped in waxed cloth. The witness followed the clerk's back as he ducked into an armory behind the dais. She counted steps, kept to shadowed eaves, and eased an iron latch. The armory smelled of cold metal and coal. Hooks hung in rows, and a heavy leather apron lay over a crate. Inside, the executioner, moving slowly, began cleaning instruments on a bench. He scraped a curved iron hook and set it on a cloth. He worked with the same economy of motion he had outside. When he noticed a figure by the door, he did not shout. He set the ladle down with "Carrio shouldn't be here," he said, voice low. Leave now. The witness held the notepad open, 3 quick lines written. She answered in a whisper that still carried, "I am looking for proof." Her voice broke on the last word. The executioner leaned forward and tapped a scar along his jaw. "Proof," he repeated. He rubbed his palms. "Proof gets men hauled for questioning. Proof gets whole houses emptied. Proof gets families burned out of the city. Proof is a fire we've fed for years." The witness stepped closer. "Who signed the orders?" she asked. He glanced at the hanging tools, at the hooks stained dark. The exchange tightened. Doubt shifted to a different fear, the possibility that the orders came from the highest seat of power. The executioner admitted nothing at first. He moved a tray of tongs across the bench and set them in a neat row. His hands calmed as he organized metal names, come down folded and sealed. He said, "We do the rest." He spat into a basin. "We are not the ones who sign the wax." The witness whispered a question about the wax seal. He looked at the bench, then slid a hand toward a crater. "There are writs inside the dais chambers when the Emperor calls for them," he said. "Signs we carry out." She pressed for more. "Which clerks deliver them? Which rooms?" He hesitated, his shoulders tightened. The executioner spoke in measured fragments now, as if measuring each syllable against risk. "Clerk Romus keeps the wads. He stamps and signs under the Emperor's thumb. He walks the stairs to the private chamber behind the dais. If the Emperor moves his hand, Romus goes quiet and brings the writ. We never ask the witness wrote the names in short bursts. Each stroke of ink was a decision. Night moved toward midnight, while the witness lingered near the tools. She found a narrow alcove and watched the executioner go up a side ladder to deliver a metal bucket for cleaning. He paused at the top and tucked a paper into his smock's inner pocket. The witness's heart forced a new emotion, a brittle hope. She believed that if she could see a written order, something tangible would exist to challenge the spectacle of paper that would show the emperor's hand. She waited until the armory doors closed, then slipped to the ladder's foot. The executioner returned with his shoulders tight and a new set of gloves. He set the bucket down and did not notice when she moved between crates. She caught sight of the smock's inner fold as he hung the bucket. A corner of waxed paper protruded. Without hesitation she reached, fingers finding warm cloth. The executioner turned fast stop. He grabbed her wrist. His grip was shockingly soft. "You will get us both killed," the witness pulled her hand back and let the paper fall onto a stack of tarred rope. The wax seal broke against the rope's fibers. On the paper in a hand she had seen the emperor use on proclamations. A single mark sat, the emperor's signet pressed in iron red wax. The witness felt her breath leave her body like a thing knocked out of her chest. The discovery created a new shift from hope to immediate danger. She pocketed the paper and moved for the door. A shadow passed the armory slit. Footsteps crossed the stone. Outside, a guard's silhouette stopped under the lantern. The witness flattened herself beside barrels and kept her hands steady. The guard approached the armory door and knocked once, loud and ceremonial. Inside, the executioner paused and swallowed. He stood between the witness and the world. "You shouldn't have taken that." The executioner put it back. He moved with the same efficient motions he used on the days. But now his hands trembled in a way she had not seen before. The witness met his eyes. "Why are you doing this?" She asked. "We sign for mass boiling." He looked away toward the ladder. "I have a family. I have debts to a man with a ledger. I have a son who coughs and will not stop. I do this to keep a roof." His voice dropped. An emotion shift threaded through him, duty to resignation to a half-confession. The guard called again and the executioner stepped to the door. "Stay here," he told the witness. He opened a crack and gave a curt exchange. "Romus, you sent nothing." "Nothing tonight," came a clipped reply. The guard left. The executioner closed the door and pushed his palm against the wood as if steadying himself. He turned back to her. "If you go after the emperor with that paper, they will take your family too." The witness tightened her jaw. She answered with a purposeful action. She wrapped the paper in oilcloth and tucked it into the notepad's back pocket. She folded the pad around the writ like a small shield. "He will make a copy," she said. "He will write it in the ledger and hide the original. If I am taken, the record will survive." The executioner watched her. "If the record survives," he said, "they will come for the clerk who stamped it. They will come for me who handled it. They will come for you who wrote it." His words narrowed the circle of choices into one cruel notch: to act and risk everything, or to leave and keep one life. She left before dawn. The square was empty except for ash and the faint smear of oil on flagstones. A stool lay overturned near the block. A rusted ladle half buried in ash caught the weak light of a single candle. In the faded glow she smelled boiled meat and the acidic tang of metal. She walked to the edge of the empty dais and held the notepad against her chest. Her hands trembled, not from cold. The witness found a cramped safehouse, folded the notepad under a floorboard, and began to write the ledger from memory. She wrote in short, declarative lines. She recorded the condemned's name, the time of execution, the guard who read the order, the number stamped on the writ, and the wax seal's impression. Each factual sentence was a small act of rebellion. More than once she paused, fingers resting on the ledger's edge, and felt a fresh rise of fear. If the ledger were found, it would be used to trace back to her. Fear shifted into a cold steadiness. She chose actions that would preserve the evidence first, then protect lives. Days later, the emperor convened a private chamber above the square to sign additional writs. The narrative's detached voice spoken in the city's records later described the scene with the same merciless precision she felt. The emperor sat with a ceremonial cloak draped over his shoulders and an iron signet ring on his hand. He signed without hesitation. He, the imperial clerk for quotas. The clerk Romas read lists aloud while a scribe tallied numbers. The executioner received new quotas and the instruction to expand the boiling spectacles to other provinces. The witness ledger now matched what the clerk read. At the next scheduled public execution, the witness took a risk. She pushed into the outer ring of the crowd with a forged pass and a pressed face. She moved like someone who belonged. Lantern light carved the emperor's profile in low relief. He raised his chin and watched the crowd like a man inspecting crops. The executioner prepared the cauldron, his motions methodical. The witness saw him pause, hesitate, then glance at the days. The executioner mouthed something small and private, a sound that looked like apology but was not worded. The witness stepped forward at the appointed moment, clutching the notepad in one hand and the sealed writ in the other. She intercepted a herald and thrust the document into his palm. "Read this now," she said, voice loud enough that heads turn adread. "What he signs," the herald blinked. "Lady."
"You cannot read it!"
she demanded. The herald's mouth opened. He read the emperor's mark aloud, stumbling over the formal language, while guards moved like a single organism toward her. The emperor stood. "Seize her," he ordered. His voice carried, "Tear the writ, and punish the one who brought lies." Before the crowd, the executioner froze, as if caught at an odd gear change. For a split second his hands hovered over the ladle. He looked at the witness and then at the emperor. The crowd pressed in. The witness felt a new shift, certainty cracking into chaos. Guards grabbed at her. The executioner stepped forward in the same motion he used to operate the cauldron. He intercepted a reaching hand and, with one clean, practiced movement, he shoved the hand aside back. He said to the guard, "Not today." The guard cursed and pushed harder. The executioner gripped the guard's wrist with a hand that had arranged hundreds of deaths without hesitation back. He repeated, voice low and precise. A rapid exchange of words followed, short lines thrown like stones. "Arrest her." The emperor snapped. "She interrupts a ceremony," shouted a captain. "He carries a writ." The witness hoarsely signed it. "The emperor's mark is on it. You lie." The emperor answered, "Ready you wish to make a show." Romus signed these lists. The executioner suddenly. "Romus signs under your watch." "Emperor Romus obeys my orders," said the emperor. The executioner pushed his hand against a guard's chest. "Romus brings the paper. We carry out the work. You signed this, Emperor." The crowd hummed like a turning wheel. The clash on the dais turned physical. Guards surged forward. The witness shoved the notepad into the herald's chest and tried to climb the dais steps. A captain grabbed her ankle and pitched her backward. The executioner moved between the witness and a second reaching hand. He took a breath that sounded like someone forcing himself to complete a task. He hated. "If you touch her," he told the captain, "you will be known as the man who boiled and then murdered the woman who came with proof." The captain hesitated. That hesitation swung the moment. Romus, the clerk, who had until then hovered near the emperor with a blotter, stepped forward with a sudden motion and slapped a sealed writ onto the dais. He spoke in a voice meant to be heard over the crowd. "It is true. The emperor signed these writs for the provinces. I delivered the lists." The emperor's face tightened. "Romus," he said sharply, "you forget your place." Romus pointed at the executioner. "They for quotas." He collected them. "They sent them from here." The crowd lurched. The witness heard her own name called by someone behind her. A woman she had helped once at a market recognized the ledger. The micro-climax unfolded in a flurry of decisions. The executioner grabbed the herald's wrist and forced the paper higher so everyone could see the seal. He dropped the ladle at his feet and set his gloved hand on the paper like a dam. Guards moved to take him. The executioner did something the witness could not have predicted. He turned his back to the emperor and faced the crowd. He handled the tools. He said in a low voice, "Do not write the orders." The orders come from the chamber above. His admission was concrete and damning. A stunned silence followed. Then the emperor barked a single command: "Bring them down." Chaos broke. The witness ran. Soldiers closed in from all directions. The executioner used his bulk to wedge between a captain and a fleeing family, shoving and throwing himself against bodies with a brutal, efficient rhythm. He cut whatever patina of ceremony had sat atop the event. The crowd surged, and in the crush the witness felt hands tear at her satchel. A clerk tried to snatch the ledger. She bit his hand. He cursed and let go. The executioner pulled a man with a rope toward the cauldron and hived him to the ground instead of letting him be tied away. He bellowed it away now! In the middle of the tumult, the witness stumbled and saw the emperor's face up close, dry, tawny, a white scar along the jaw, a ring glinting. He raised his chin and watched like a man who measures harvest. The witness spat out, "You signed it. The emperor's jaw tightened. You will rot for this offense," he said. He moved to the dais edge and struck the herald with a flat hand for failing to stop the reading. The executioner risked a hand to shove the emperor's cloak aside. He finished by shoving the clerk's wrist into the crowd's side. "He is the one who stamps," he said. The micro-cliffhanger burst when the executioner turned his back to the emperor and placed the writ in his own apron. Asking the witness to run with it, "Take it to the safe house now," he hissed. The witness took the paper and bolted. Behind her, the executioner stayed as the emperor raised his voice and the guards closed ranks. That refusal to flee was a new, painful emotion in the executioner, guilt shaped into a defiant choice. At dawn the square was emptied. Smoke and the scent of boiled fat clung to the stones. An overturned stool lay where the witness had last seen the notepad. A rusted ladle stuck half buried in ashy sand. The witness crept from her hiding place and moved through alleys that still smelled of burned rope. She slid under a floorboard in a cramped room and placed the sealed writ in the ledger's back pocket. She wrote line after line. The ledger filled with names and times, with wax impressions and the record of who carried the orders. She wrote the executioner's confession as he had spoken it, neat and spare, the executioner, his tools, his reasons. The chapter resolves on a concrete beat. A knock came at the safe house door while she inked the final line. The witness did not look up. She slid the original writ into a hidden seam in the ledger and snapped the cover shut. Her hand trembled against the leather. The knock became 3 deliberate raps. She swallowed and reached for the ledger, fingers folding around the oilcloth. The last sentence she wrote, before the door opened, was a plain record of actions taken and names who had spoken them. The knock came again, and she moved to the door with the ledger pressed to her chest. A courier slammed a sealed writ onto the executioner's workbench while embers under the cauldron hissed. The executioner looked up from a coal-streaked palm and read the header, then the column of names. Fear tightened the witness' throat. She had shoved through bodies before and felt that same cold press between ribs. The roster meant more deaths tomorrow. The roster meant her neighbor, the baker's boy, might be called before dawn. The narrator recorded the moment with the same clinical steadiness used in official minutes. He noted the courier's boots scuffed with ash, the wax seal split at one corner, the smudge of oil on the writ. He noted the executioner's thumb that paused over a name, and how the man did not move to speak. The witness stayed in the shadowed doorway and watched through the seam of a crate. She had been there when the condemned met the cauldron in the square. Her memory kept the man's mouth moving in a wet, shocked rhythm. That memory pushed her forward now. The witness moved before she had a plan. She slipped along racks of salted rope and stacked ladles. Her fingers closed on the edge of the table where the new writ lay. The imperial clerk, a thin man in a faded tunic, stepped from behind a barrel. "What are you doing?" The clerk. The witness did not answer. She copied 3 names with a stub of charcoal onto the oilcloth, she kept wrapped around her notepad. Fear was the engine of her choices, fear for the baker's boy and a sudden, blunt rage at the ledger's deliberate cruelty. The executioner watched her write. He did not move to stop her. He wiped his palms on his apron and said, "You will get that hand burned if you touch the iron those names, the witness. Voice low, someone must know who is on it." She the word names as if speaking it aloud could make the list smaller. The clerk swallowed and he began, then shut his mouth when the executioner lifted a hand. The executioner spoke once, flat put it back. Orders first. The witness left, with the copied names folded into her shawl. She moved through a yard where men measured iron and tested ladles by the fire. The air smelled of coal and old oil. She had told herself she would only warn one household. That intention changed when she passed the blacksmith's bench and saw an iron ladle shaped with a hook she had never noticed before. The executioner and the emperor's agent had been refining the ritual. At the private dais, the emperor sat behind a thick oak table and signed. The narrator recorded the motion. The emperor's ring pressed the wax. The quill cut at the loop of a name. Then the stamp of his iron signet sealed sentence into law. The emperor did not speak as he wrote. He folded another writ with the same small gestures he used when inspecting military reports. His manner was theatrical and measured. The magistrate beside him cleared his throat, placed names in order, and bowed. "Emperor," the magistrate said, "this roster will be persuasive." The emperor dropped the quill. "Persuasion is a tool," he said. "Begin with 6. Then the others will speak. For the rest," the magistrate left with a curt nod. The emperor watched him go. He brushed his scar with the backs of his fingers and glanced at the brazier where the cauldron's heat breathed yellow. He did not look at the list. The narrator noted the calculation in the emperor's face without commentary. The witness moved through the market that night toward a narrow alley. The crowd there smelled of cabbage and wet wool. She found the trembling imperial clerk she had seen earlier. He leaned against a cart, hands clenched around a small slip of paper. Her name for him in her thoughts remained clerk. He had no other title in the ledger of her life. "Clerk," she said. Using his name aloud as a tether give it, he slid the paper into her palm. "You shouldn't have taken those names earlier," he whispered. "They changed." The emperor added 3 tonight. "Who?" she asked, though she already scanned the ink. One of the new names was the baker's boy. Her hand tightened around the charcoal copy until the oilcloth creased. "You know him. The clerk, you speak to him." "I should not." A rough voice cut the alley. "Get moving." 2 soldiers passed by, helmets low. The witness barely had time to step back. The clerk shoved the rest of the slip into the lining of his cloak and pushed her toward the open street. She ran with the list at her breast, hearing the soldiers' boots pound the cobbles behind her. Her first emotion, suspicion, shifted into urgent dread as she ran. She had suspected the list would grow. Now she had proof. She chose to go warn the baker's house. She reached the baker's door and battered on the wood. The old woman inside opened a slit and peered. The witness thrust the folded names under the crack. "Tell Thomas to run. He is on the list," she said. The old woman blinked. "Who you?" "Someone gave this to me in the alley." The witness "Tell him to hide in the kiln until dawn." The woman hesitated. "They will watch the kiln." "Soldiers watch every kiln at night." Now the witness looked at the woman's hands. The way her knuckles showed where flour had scrubbed skin raw. She had a choice: shout into the street and risk soldiers, or leave the warning and hope it reached Thomas by luck. She chose to push a hand through the crack and press the oilcloth against the drywall where Thomas might find it later. She felt the old woman's fingers close on the cloth like a promise. Soldiers blocked the exit as the witness turned. They moved with a trained coordination. One of them, a tall man with a cropped beard, stepped forward and demanded identification. The witness produced nothing. She had no papers to prove she had been in the armory. "Saw you in the square the last time." The bearded soldier said, "You were close to the condemned. I was watching from the crowd." The witnessee warned people, "You did not keep your hands to yourself tonight." Another soldier snapped. His voice had the blunt certainty of men ordered to enforce scripts. The witness backed toward a narrow lane. She had intended to run but found the soldiers already closing the path. One reached for her shawl. She twisted free and darted between two stalls. The soldiers kept pursuit. A woman's shout rose as a cart overturned. The witness slipped into the tangle of side streets. This was the mini cliffhanger the narrator recorded as a pivot. The witness was cornered, the list in her cloaked breast, and the soldiers smelled victory. She had to choose between hiding and returning with proof to others who might act. She chose to head for the armory. In the armory, the executioner stood over a low table. He and the Emperor's agent bent over a tray of small glass vials. The executioner tasted a drop on a gloved fingertip and spat. He tested a ladle by dipping it, and watching how the oil clung. "This will burn longer. The agent they will writhe. They will speak and call names while the crowd watches the executioner. I do not like to lengthen it. I keep the metal steady. I keep the oil clean." But orders come from above. The agent tapped the list he had brought from the dais. "The Emperor asks for theater. The Emperor wants the crowd to learn to fear the names." When the witness burst into the armory, the executioner froze. The agents started. The clang of a dropped tool echoed. The executioner, voice low, back away. The witness thrust the charcoal copy onto the tablet. "The clerk gave me more names," she said. "Put them in his cloak. 3 were added tonight. Thomas is on it." The agent moved like a net closing. "Who you?" he demanded. "The clerk." "The witness." Her voice shook. She could feel the second emotion shift, dread changing into a hard, focused insistence. She would not let Thomas go alone to the square. "You must stop the ceremony." The agent laughed once. A dry sound stopped the ceremony. He looked at the executioner. "This is not a private matter." The Emperor signed. The witness grabbed the agent by the sleeve. "You can delay the emblems. You can misplace the ladles. You can slow the boil. You can make them survive." The executioner stepped between them. He smelled of hot oil and sweat. "Listen to me," he said to the witness. "He served the order. If I refuse, someone else will take my place. If I slow the oil, they will find the flaw and hang me for treason. Then let the agent slow it." The witness snapped at you. "Yourself. You do not want longer pain." The agent looked at the executioner, and then away. "We are not the ones who choose names. We are the hands." An argument flared. The witness pushed. The agent prayed. The executioner made a worried sound and folded his hands. The executioner had always been methodical and resigned. He now had to choose whether to be mechanical or to balk. He chose small gestures of delay. He swapped one ladle for another under the pretense of checking balance. The agent watched, then barked an order to a nearby soldier to fetch fresh oil. "Will not alter the papers. The agent too can make the delivery slower." But the writ stands. The witness realized the fight in the armory would be a matter of minutes. She needed more time than that. She moved to the corner where a stack of canvases hid a dull iron grate. She saw a narrow hatch that led toward the service alleys. She could hide the copied names there and return to warn others. She pushed the oilcloth into the gap and closed her hand over it until it was gone. Outside, dawn was a thin gray. The magistrate read names from the dais, while the crowd shifted under whips of cold wind. The Emperor watched, expression steady. He signed the final writ, then handed the magistrate the stamped copy. "Begin," he said. The witness forced her way to the front as the first condemned was hauled up. She felt the crowd pressing at her back. She shouted the baker's boy's name. The magistrate's head snapped up. Soldiers converged on her like a wall. The executioner, already at his station, lifted his long iron ladle. He had the look of a man following a practiced motion. The cauldron steamed and the first body met the rim. "Witness!" someone shouted. The magistrate's voice carried. The Emperor's eyes flicked to the commotion and narrowed. The witness shoved through the crowd, breath burning. She reached for the dais. The executioner dipped the ladle. The magistrate stepped forward and hissed to the Emperor, This woman is causing a scene. The emperor's answer was quiet. Remove her. Continue. Soldiers seized the witness. She kicked and twisted. The crowd shouted. An old woman screamed that the baker's boy had been a good boy. The witness felt hands crush her arms. The executioner paused with the ladle lifted, a muscle in his jaw working. He looked at her, then at the emperor. For a moment, a new face appeared in the recorded sequence, the magistrate. He moved closer to the emperor, whispers passing between them. Sire, the magistrate, this will be seen. There will be backlash in certain quarters. The emperor looked without shifting. Then let them speak. Let them learn there is no protection. Let names make them obedient. The executioner finished the motion. The ritual proceeded. The witness' mouth filled with dirt and the scent of boiling oil. She tasted iron. Soldiers dragged her back. The crowd's roar folded and turned into a low, raking sound that the narrator later listed as terror and spectacle. After the ceremony, the witness lay bruised in a shadowed alley behind the tavern. Her hands trembled when she unwrapped the oilcloth. The names on the paper were smudged with sweat. She rewrote them into the secret ledger she kept hidden in the lining of her satchel. The ledger was a battered slate of pages bound in oilcloth. She wrote carefully, fingers ink-stained. She recorded dates, places, and small details that made the names human. Baker's boy Thomas, age 16. A tailor's apprentice who had once fixed a torn sleeve for her. A soldier who had refused a command. A sympathetic clerk appeared, the same clerk from the market, his face hollow. He watched her from the lee of a barrel and then stepped forward with a careful motion. He took the ledger, glanced at the entries, and tucked it into his own coat after flicking his eyes toward her bruiser clerk. The witness, why would you keep this? He closed the ledger so that the pages did not show because some names must be kept outside the lists they give to the magistrate. He said, because you ran into me tonight, and because I saw how you shoved through the crowd. I cannot stop them from signing, but I can hide a record. The witness looked at him. The clerk's face was not heroic, it was tired. He had ink under his nails and a nervous motion in his jaw. You will put this where it will be safe? She asked. He nodded. I have a friend in the granary who knows how to bury things. I will put it there. If anyone asks, the ledger does not belong to me. A new shift unspooled in the witness, from dread to a tight, wary hope. She did not trust hope, but she could use the clerk's discreet loyalty. In that moment she learned the twist that changed how she understood the earlier event in the square. The clerk was not simply a frightened scribe. He kept his own list. He had been copying names for years and pocketing duplicates. He had been marking who among the crowd remembered faces. The clerk walked away with a slow, deliberate step. He looked back once and the witness saw that he had slipped a folded coin into his palm as if to pay for danger. She did not know then whether he would keep the ledger or trade it for his life. She only knew she had handed over evidence and that someone else now bore the burden of concealment. Night folded into an uneasy morning. The emperor's theatrics had the expected effect. Rumors crawled through neighborhoods like oil. People banned certain streets. Kilns were watched. The executioner stoked the cauldron and checked the hooked ladles. The witness lay in a loft above a bakery and watched the baker's kiln with a pocketed list. She had done what she could to warn Thomas. At dusk, she remembered the man on the block from the first boiling. She remembered the wet rhythm of his mouth. She remembered the way the crowd had pressed forward with hungry faces as if the spectacle fed them. The witness sharpened a stub of charcoal and added a margin note to the ledger. Clerk took a copy. Granary, she drew a small cross beside Thomas' name to mark him as warned. The executioner returned that night to the armory and saw the hooked ladle on the table. He rubbed his palms together and felt the oil-stained colluses. He had not wanted the escalation, but he had rationalized his presence as survival. He had refined the ritual because he needed to keep his position and feed a child. He spoke to no one about the trade-offs he had made. In a final recorded exchange, the magistrate came to the armory and said, "The emperor asks for a second round. Names will be extended to the next town." The executioner looked at the empty cauldron. "Will do as the emperor commands." The witness heard the new order before she read it. It came in the shape of troops marching past the bakery at midnight. She rolled from her heap of straw, sewed the ledger into a lining, and waited. A knock came at the door that night. She stiffened. The final paragraph of the knock was 3 quick raps. The witness opened the door a sliver. The clerk held out a small packet and a single-word granary. He pushed the packet into her hand and stepped back into the dark. Soldiers passed by without slowing. The witness closed the door, felt the paper between her fingers, and heard a cart creak away in the street. The ledger now had a second hiding place, and the list had a record in 2 places. Outside, the square lay empty for the first time since dawn, but names were still being added to ledgers and to memories, and the cauldron's steam would be stoked again. A courier shoved a sealed writ under the tannery shutter and thrust the paper into the witness' damp hand. Fear tightened her throat when she saw the name inked at the top, Kadir Alim, her brother's full name in the emperor's column. The room smelled of tanning acid and coal smoke. Her fingers left dark smudges on the parchment as she read the margin note aloud and felt the world narrow. The first emotion that pushed her into action was fear, not a vague unease, but a precise, cold knowledge that the list had moved from strangers to kin. She had seen public boiling before. In the prior crowd she had shoved through bodies and grit as the condemned's shoulders met the cauldron rim. She knew the sound the oil made when flesh met heat. That memory arrived as a detail, the wet rasp of a throat, the metallic squeal of a ladle against iron. She folded the writ into her apron and left the tannery room without pausing to explain to the woman who shared her hearth. There was no time for words. The witness ran the back alley toward the armory, the sealed paper burning cold against her palm. Doubt flickered between each step. Doubt that Kadir could be listed by error. Doubt that the executioner would defy a writ. Those doubts lasted only until she reached the iron door and heard the steady clank of tools from inside. She knocked with a raw palm and called, "Executioner." Open, her voice cut through the pre-dawn cold. The executioner opened a sliver and peered out with eyes that had watched embers for years. He did not recognize the witness by name. The witness pushed the shutter wider and shoved the writ toward him. "Read this," she said. "Kadir Alim. You know him. He can't go." Her voice pitched, small, urgent. She watched the executioner's face while he scanned the paper. His jaw tightened. A tendon moved in his neck. "The executioner, give it here." His voice was the low gravel the witness had heard before in the square, neutral and practiced. He took the writ and laid it on the workbench under lamplight. The coal dust collected at his knuckles. He tapped the seal margin with a gloved finger and said, "This has the emperor's private seal. No ordinary writ. No substitution without permission." His words carried a quiet, material consequence, signature, pressure, law. The witness pushed forward. Her hands shook where she held a folded coin and a scrap of embroidered cloth, the token she meant to trade for mercy. "Please," she said, "Kadir is my brother. He is not a rebel. Remember the man you once told me about who hesitated on the rope? I can find him. I can pay." Her sentence broke into action and into plea. She placed the coin on the bench and pushed the cloth forward so the executioner could see the pattern. The executioner looked at the coin, then at the witness. "You know the rules, witness. I do my duty." "The emperor's hand is clear." He glanced toward the brazier where embers glowed under the cauldron's rim. "If I delay, the messenger will call me treason. If I act, I answer to the emperor." His voice added a practical map of consequences. The witness searched his face for the hesitation she had once glimpsed in the square. A courier slammed through the armory door then, breathless and impatient, bringing an amended writ and the new line, "Delay denied. Augment spectacle. Report noncompliance by dawn." The royal messenger's presence raised the stakes in a visible, procedural way. He placed the new paper on the bench and jabbed a finger at the seal executioner. The Emperor wants the spectacle amplified. No mercy, no substitutions. You understand the penalty for disobedience. His tone left no room for interpretation. The state had added pressure to the tool already in the executioner's hands. Tension shifted into cold calculation inside the executioner's features. He ran a hand across the edge of the bench and replied, "I understand, messenger." Orders stand. He did not raise his voice. He did not have to. The witness watched the exchange, heartbeat loud in her ears. Her earlier doubt melted into an urgent fear that moved her limbs into motion. She lurched toward the messenger and grabbed the amended retell him. The witness to the messenger, voice thinner than before, "Kadir is a tanner's son. He tends carts. He is not a saboteur." The messenger did not look at her. He rolled the paper between two fingers and said, "Not now." The Emperor decides. The witness' attempt at explanation collided with bureaucratic refusal. She left the armory without permission and ran to the barracks where soldiers slept on hard planks. She had seen a guard there the last time she had pushed through the crowd, a man with a flicker in his posture when orders sounded wrong. She found him by the shared basin in the dim, half awake, and laid her token and coin before him. "Guard," she said, "you looked at him differently before. Help me now." "Help Kadir." The guard blinked and touched the coin with a thumb. The sympathetic guard, named Tariq, said, "You should not have come here." Witness. He stretched a hand toward the bedding and took the cloth without lifting it like a bribe. He weighed risk. Tariq. The witness, Tariq, you saw the man's hands at the block. You saw a man's hesitation. You can look away now, or you can help. Her tone tightened into a negotiation. Tariq's face closed like a gate. He whispered, "You know the penalty. I have a wife. I have a son." The witness leaned closer until their shoulders almost touched and replied, "If you don't help, Kadir dies. If you help, we make a plan. I will make sure your name never meets the Emperor's ledger." Her promise relied on a risk she could not yet meet. Tariq swallowed. He fingered the coin and slipped it into his tunic. An hour later, the witness forced her way again into the armory as the executioner arranged tools, ladles, tongs, hooks on a wooden board. The executioner, methodical and resigned, let the witness see every implement he used. She touched a ladle once, only to feel the cold metal, and then drew her hand back. The executioner do not touch tools. They carry heat and obligation. His voice named practicality, not morality. The executioner unfolded the original writ and pointed to the marginal directive in a small, exact hand. "Amplify spectacle. Bring names forward publicly. Let fear spread." This is not punishment for one crime. This is demonstration. The witness read the line and felt betrayal sharpen into clarity. Betrayal shifted her earlier fear into targeted anger, a new emotion that forced decisions. Why Kadir? Why him? Her sentence cut bluntly. The executioner hooked a ladle and balanced it. "Do not know the Emperor's reasons. I only know my orders. The list comes from the palace ledger. Names are chosen in the Emperor's hand." He spoke without deflection. The witness stepped closer and asked, "Did you ever hesitate before?" The executioner tightened his jaw and said, "Once, in the square. I waited for an order that never came. I lost a day of sleep for it." His admission revealed a limit she had seen before, a single moment of conscience. At pre-dawn, a royal messenger burst into the armory with an amended ribbon and a thinly veiled threat. Executioner, the Emperor will not tolerate hesitation. Delay equals treason. You will sign your name to a different fate if you balk." The executioner turned the writ over with gloved fingers, and, for a moment, the metal of his tools gleamed like questions. The witness felt hope and terror flip-flop, hope that the executioner might hesitate. Terror that the messenger's threat would force him onward. The executioner put down his ladle. I have a ledger, too. I answer to that ledger. I do not wish to die for delay." He stared at the witness and then at the messenger. "If I refuse, you will bring soldiers. If I comply, I perform a ritual I did not design." Dialogue narrowed into choice. The executioner did not want to be the man whose hands signed someone else into boiling. The witness, then do not be the one who signs it. Let Tariq take the post. Let the soldier stand false. Give me a name you can spare for substitution. She tried to carve a path around the writ. Tariq appeared in the doorway then, face pale and steady. I can look away at the block. I will not raise my spear. I can slow them. But I will not kill. The executioner listened. His fingers brushed the iron ring he wore, and he said, "You gamble with your life." Tariq replied, "So do you, executioner. So do you." In that exchange, a small conspiracy formed. A soldier's hesitation could change a single death into a scramble. They set a plan, provisional and risky. Tariq would be stationed near the block and would hold the spear loosely, feigning compliance. The executioner would pretend to follow the writ, but leave a gap in the mechanism, a loosened rope. A hidden snag in the rigging, something that would allow the witness to act. The messenger, impatient and used to absolute orders, would not notice a subtle mechanical mercy. The witness left the armory with the executioner and Tariq, both aware of the plan, each keeping different faces for the dawn. On the days at first light, the square filled with bodies and breath and the smell of oil. The emperor stepped to his seat with the ceremonial cloak heavy on his shoulders. He did not look at the witness. He lifted the writ and read names aloud. The witness threaded through the crowd toward the block, each step measured and loud to her. Her palms were raw from running, and she tasted smoke in the back of her throat. The executioner stood by the cauldron, tools resting near his boots, and Tariq positioned himself with his spear as if to obey. The crowd grew silent as the condemned man, not Kadir at first, but another, was bound at the rim of the steaming cauldron. The witness scanned the list as the page was read aloud, waiting for Kadir's name to be called. The executioner kept his hands on the ladle, but did not lift it. For a moment hope swelled in the witness. The plan might work. Then the emperor read Kadir's name. The witness lunged. She crossed the last yard at a run and grabbed for the condemned man's arm, but soldiers closed in and a violent scramble began. The witness felt biting fabric against her palms, heard a soldier grunt, felt her fingers slip. She pulled again and a guard struck her across the cheek. Her lips split. She tasted iron and knew the world had narrowed to a single physical fight. The executioner moved toward the chaos with a long step, the ladle hanging like a slow pendulum above the cauldron. The moment of truth arrived as the executioner had to decide whether to strike into the scramble or to turn away from the ritual he performed. He hesitated half a heartbeat, and that gap turned into a pivot. He threw his weight into the crowd, not to strike the witness, but to grab the rope that held the condemned. He jerked, sending the man spinning away from the rim by a hair's breadth. A soldier cursed. Tariq shoved his spear at a different guard and used the motion to create leverage for the witness to pull the condemned free. A short, brutal exchange followed, 3 rapid lines of shouted orders, 3 strikes of a spear, 3 sounds of someone dragging across wooden plank. "Hold him," barked a surgeon. "Tariq, stand down." The witness cried, "Tariq, help me!" She said again, "Executioner, cut the bindings." The executioner found a knife and sliced cord as soldiers stumbled, and the condemned collapsed away from the iron rim. The witness wrapped her arms around him and felt his chest heave. The crowd shouted. The emperor rose, face pale with anger, and the royal messenger stamped forward, furious. The executioner stepped back, palms stained with coal and sweat, and did not meet the emperor's eyes. He had chosen a mechanical mercy and, in doing so, had steadied a single human life. The witness held Kadir and whispered, "Kadir, hold on. Breathe." She pressed a cloth to his shoulder wound and felt the texture of his skin. For a moment, the world narrowed to the concrete, the smell of hot oil, the rasp of breath, the scrape of a spear across a boot. Soldiers seized the witness and Kadir both. Tariq was dragged from the ranks, and the executioner was ordered to the dais. The emperor's voice cut like an axe through the square. "Treason will be punished." Names cannot be removed. After proclamation, the messenger produced a new writ and shoved it toward the executioner. The executioner looked from the writ to the witness and back to his tools. He made a sound like a breath pushed through teeth and signed his name on the margin of the amended paper. This twist, the executioner's public signature, changed how the witness understood him. Until that second, she had believed him a man who might risk all to stop the ritual. The signature revealed a more complex truth. He would create mercy when he could, but he would also mark his compliance when forced. His actions had saved Kadir. His pen had also accepted a ledger that might consume others. The witness' anger returned, sharpened into a new, heavier shape. Betrayal folded into gratitude. After the confrontation, the square thinned. Soldiers dragged Kadir and the witness toward a makeshift cot. The witness tucked a small notepad wrapped in oilcloth under her palm and began to write in quick, legible strokes what had happened. The courier, the writ, the executioner's hesitation, Tariq's choice, the messenger's threat, the emperor's reaction. The documentary narrator would later describe these moves in a ledger tone, but the witness recorded details for memory: a burnt notch on the executioner's ladle handle, the exact wording of the marginal command, Tariq's thumbprint smear on a coin. The executioner returned to his bench while the emperor departed with a measured, indifferent gait. He did not look at those he had affected. The executioner picked up the long iron ladle and set it into a rack, his hands steadying the tool as if balancing scale weights. He rubbed his palms, an old habit after touching metal, and lit the brazier to keep the embers ready. The witness watched him through a slit in the shelter and felt an aftertaste of unease despite Kadir breathing beside her. The executioner's actions had grafted a practical, complicated mercy onto a system meant to paralyze compassion. The witness wrote the last line in her oilcloth notepad. He signed what saved him, and what will call others. She closed the pad and wrapped it in the cloth. The public square cooled to ash and coals. A single rusted ladle lay half buried in grey ash near the emptied cauldron, a concrete remnant where a choice had been taken. The witness kept her hand on Kadir's arm and felt his pulse slow. She had turned the list into a personal fight and, for now, had won one life. Tension settled but did not disappear. The emperor's writ still stood. Executioner signatures still littered margins. Tariq had taken a risk that might be counted against him by morning. The witness had traded coin and a promise for a brother's breath. The documentary narrator would later catalogue these motions without commentary ledger items: courier arrival at midnight, amended writ at dawn. Executioner's marginal signature at the square, but for the witness the ending was plainly a set of actions: a carved ledger entry, a hidden bribe, a cut rope, a shoved spear, a signed name. Her notebook recorded all of it in blunt terms. The final beat of the chapter is small and concrete. As soldiers hauled empty benches away, a courier arrived at the witness door with another sealed package. The witness opened it with a coin edge and found a folded scrap naming a new district and a list of numbers. She looked at Kadir's face as he slept fitfully, and then at Tariq, who stood by the delivery with a hollowed look. The witness put the scrap into her oilcloth pad and whispered, "We keep this." We watched that action. Filing a new writ into a small ledger of resistance closed the chapter with a specific situational beat. A decision to remember and to continue the work of recording who the emperor chose next. Emotion shifts threaded the chapter: fear when the name arrived, doubt while negotiating with the executioner, anger at the emperor's margin directive, hope during Tariq's hesitation, relief when the condemned was pulled free, betrayal when the executioner signed, and renewed vigilance after the courier's final knock. Each shift was visible in actions: a hand that trembled, a coin that changed pockets, a cut rope, a penned signature. The witness left the square with Kadir under an oilcloth blanket, Tariq's coin hidden in her apron, and the executioner's ladle still hanging where it could be used again. She had resolved the immediate threat, but not the system that created it. She shoved past a soldier and snatched the iron token from the prisoner's wrist. Kadir Alim's name stared back at her. Fear made her fingers clamp the cold metal and pushed her body deeper into the palace service corridor where damp stone swallowed sound. The witness moved with one clear thought: stop the writ, stop the cauldron. The corridor smelled of coal and boiled oil, and the prisoner's ankles scraped the flagstones as soldiers dragged him toward the dais. Within 3 steps the witness understood the stakes: either a paper would be torn or a body would be poured into iron. The witness had been shoved through bodies before. She remembered the afternoon when a different procession had pushed her into the crowd and left her palms raw from clutching others. Now those hands trembled only enough to fold the token so the name was visible. Fear sat behind each swallow, but determination shaped her feet. She had a notepad wrapped in oilcloth in her satchel. She had the exact inked letters from the earlier writ that named Kadir. She could not walk away. Soldiers parted like living walls. A courier glanced up as she barged forward. "What are you doing?" The courier barked. The witness burned a single look at him and thrust the token into his chest. "This is mine," she said, voice tight. "Kadir Alim, stop it." "Stop the writ." The courier's jaw tightened. He stepped back and held the token as if it might explode. An attendant's lamp swung near the stairwell and threw the soldiers' faces into hard angles. The witness used those angles, the momentary confusion, to slip toward the armory doorway where the executioner kept his tools. She had watched the executioner at the Cauldron before: broad shoulders, oil-stained fingers, the way he rubbed his palms after handling metal. Memory of that motion steadied her. Fear had pushed her here, but another emotion, something like bargain, stole the air from her lungs and told her to speak. She found the executioner among hooks and ladles. He did not turn when she entered. Habit kept him focused on the embers under the cauldron. She put the token and the writ on his bench with deliberate force. "Read it," she said, and the word came out short: "Kadir Alim." Delay. Anything. The executioner let the metal clink as he picked up the sheet. His fingers left thin black smudges on the seal. He read the imperial cipher, the private stamp she had seen before in a courier's wax. He recognized it, and did not look surprised. "You shouldn't be here," the executioner finally. His voice was low, practical. "This work is not for women in the armory." He held the writ between 2 work-worn hands and watched her the emperor signs. Orders proceed. His gaze was a scale, duty on one side, whatever memory the scale still held on the other. The witness forced her voice down to facts. "Kadir isn't a criminal. Has a tannery clerk. He is my brother. There is a name on that list, and you have the power to delay until someone petitions properly." She flipped the writ so the numbered column caught the candle light. "Just 1 day. 1 hour. Tell them the pot isn't ready. Give me time." "Give him time." The executioner folded his face into a mask he had worn in the square a dozen times before. "I cannot lie to soldiers. I cannot lie to the emperor." He did not say "cannot forgive." He did not need to. The witness saw the line of his jaw tighten. A second emotion stirred in her: doubt. Doubt undercut fear and asked, "What if this man would betray you the moment the emperor observed?" She stepped closer until the smell of hot oil and coal smoke filled her mouth. "You owe me nothing," she said. "You owe him nothing. But you remember Kadir." She the name like a plea worked into a hinge. He looked at her then with something like recognition instead of only duty. "Kadir saved me once," the executioner. He did not explain. The fact landed like a stone against the witness' ribs and shifted the immediate risk into a new form: hope that might be bait. The executioner led her around a hanging tapestry into a narrow, shadowed antechamber where tools hung like a dark forest. He kept his gloves on. "You can't speak above a whisper here," he said. "If I shelter one name from the list, I get marked. The emperor will notice. If he notices, the theater must proceed louder to cover the omission." His breath moved through coal smoky. "Will delay 1 writ for every favor you promise me later. A favor that cannot be asked in public." A new emotion, calculation, slid through the witness. Fear thinned into bargaining. She had expected a simple aid or a cold refusal. She had not expected a ledger of debt to be traded for kinwhat favor. She asked name it the executioner tapped the edge of an iron ladle when the time comes. You will slip a word to a man at the Eastern market. You will hand him a strip of linen. He will deliver it unseen. I will owe no further debt. He will owe the emperor nothing. Do this and I will keep Kader off the list for a day. Do not do this and I will obey. He avoided her eyes when he said the last clause. She stared at the ladle until the metal blurred. The bargain felt like a trap dressed as mercy. Yet the alternative was a public death by boiling. The witness imagined Kadir standing with cords cutting into his wrists, while the crowd chewed the air and the wonder of public punishment ate his skin. A violent image of the Cauldron's lip against a shoulder made her hands clench. Promise me now. The executioner, lend me your weight. I will move the time. 1 hour. A small window. Enough to make papers arrive from a distant governor. Enough to claim a clerical error. 1 hour is all I can risk. The witness breathed and shifted between fear and resolve. I promise. Her voice broke on the word, and there was no room for show. She imagined a future hour, a slim, precise slice of time where a ledger could be hidden or a courier could lose his way. She clung to that imagined hour like a lifeline and left the armory with an impossible bargain pressing against her ribs. Outside, the palace corridors felt narrower. Soldiers had tightened their patrol. A captain she did not know barked orders, and the procession that had stalled in the service corridor resumed with new force. Word traveled faster than paper in halls that smelled of incense and boiled metal. An attendant moved like a shadow along the gallery and presented a fresh stack of writs to the emperor on the raised days. The emperor sat in a chair that put him above sight of the crowd, his cloak folded around his knees like a slow, contained tide. Couriers bowed and the emperor tapped his signet ring against the newest seal. He stamped each writ with a private cipher without glancing at the names. The seal's impression was a private signature of legitimacy. Soldiers accepted it like a mechanical truth. The witness watched from the edge of the gallery and felt panic tighten her spine. The emperor's public stamping erased doubt about authority and made any private delay a daring theft. From her vantage, she heard a courier murmur, "He is stamping the purge list himself tonight." A soldier answered, "He will make examples." The square will remember. The witness breath hitched. Another emotion surfaced, panic. Her earlier bargain might not be enough if the emperor chose to press the ritual as spectacle precisely because of the delay. She moved along the shadow of the gallery and slipped behind a heavy tapestry near the dais. The executioner met her back there, eyes red-rimmed from smoke, and sleepless nights. "He can hold one writ back," he said, but the captain grows suspicious. "If they see you, they will call it sedition." A clatter echoed from the corridor as soldiers tightened the cordon. The captain's boots grew louder. The witness pressed her forehead against the tapestry and tried to make the room still enough to hear the plan hatch. She unfolded the notepad and scribbled the name Kadir again, as if ink could make a legal argument more real. Then she saw the captain's shadow at the tapestry edge. He nothing, but his presence sharpened the choice into action. The witness stepped from behind the tapestry at the exact wrong moment. The captain seized her by the elbow. "What are you doing here?" he demanded. The executioner threw up a hand. "She is with me. She is petitioning." The captain's face went hard, and he barked to soldiers in the corridor, heard them forward. No delays. The corridor filled with movement. Soldiers began to herd the procession toward the public square. The captain's instruction converted a furtive plan into an exposed gambit. The witness felt the air leave her chest, and then a sudden lock click in her thinking. There was no time for petitions or paper now. The executioner's promise still stood an hour's delay, but the captain's tightening of patrols had turned the delay into an urgent theft of time. She ran. She ran up the stone steps that led to the raised dais, palms scraping a banister worn smooth by generations of court traffic. Men looked at her with the mild surprise of people who see a woman break protocol but assume nothing dangerous. A soldier shoved at her shoulder to slow her get down, he said. She shrugged him off, feeling the rope of her argument tighten. If she could reach Kadir, if she could pull him from the line. The executioner could perform a mercy that would not be observable at the emperor's feet. The witness dropped onto the platform and lunged for Kadir's wrists. He was smaller than she expected, shoulders hunched, face already flushing with the heat of fear. He stared at her with hollowed cheeks, and the faint burn mark on his forearm looked raw in that light. Kadir, she said, and the name made soldiers pause long enough for the emperor to rise. The emperor stood then, cloak sliding back to reveal ceremonial trim. His steel-grey eyes landed on the witness and Kadir, as if measuring which of them might be useful as a lesson. He spoke once, and the gallery quieted. Proceed, the emperor. His voice was measured authority with a cold edge. Let the ritual remind them who governs. The executioner had to act under those eyes. The square below hummed with expectation. Soldiers tightened their grips on ropes. The crowd leaned forward like a field of reeds. The witness felt a surge of something that blended fear and outrage. She grabbed Kadir's arm and pulled, forcing him backward as a unit of soldiers tried to shove him forward. Shouts rose. A hand closed on her wrist and a soldier hissed, "Get off the dais." She twisted free and found herself holding Kadir by the shoulders, face inches from his. "Kadir, listen to me," she said. "Oh, not fear." Screaming. "Breathe, I am here." He promised an hour. "Hold on to me." Her words came in short stabs. Kadir's eyes darted around, and for a heartbeat panic swallowed him. Then he focused on the witness and found a finger to anchor. At the rim of the cauldron, the executioner hesitated. The emperor's eyes were on him. The courtyard had quieted into a listening bowl, and the imposed ritual required him to be a technician and a spectacle maker. He stepped forward with the long iron ladle in hand, a tool that dragged steam and a smell of burnt flesh through the air. The executioner met the witness' gaze, and in that single look the bargain they had struck collected into a decision. The crowd expected a shove. The executioner tightened his grip on the ladle and then, instead of pushing Kadir, he placed the ladle across the condemned man's shoulders and used the flat of the iron to pin Kadir against the block while his other hand, gloved, moved with a hidden motion. The movement was fast, precise, practiced. It was not the public shove the spectators waited for. A soldier shouted, "Hold him steady!" The executioner obeyed the order with a mechanical nod, but his right hand adducted something small from his belt and slid it into Kadir's palm. It was a knife wrapped in oilcloth. The witness saw it with the motion flicker at the edge of her sight and understood at once. The executioner had chosen a last small mercy in private. The witness caught Kadir's eye. He looked at the knife the way drowned men look at a sliver of dry wood. He understood the gift and the price. She mouthed his name once, Kadir, and it was a containing act. He nodded, a single taut movement, and used the blade to end his life, quickly in a gesture that spared him the cauldron's open agony. The sound of cloth and the intake of breath in the crowd filled the square like a return tide. There was no public spectacle of boiling that night. The emperor did not step down from his dais to pronounce the ritual complete. Instead, he closed his mouth and signed a different set of papers with a private cipher. The soldiers moved with practiced choreography to present the scene as if nothing irregular had occurred. Some in the crowd murmured confusion. Others waited for the expected show. An attendant whispered into the emperor's ear, and the emperor signaled for the procession to conclude. The captain barked orders at soldiers to restore discipline. No one leave. Keep formation. Present the body to the gallery. The soldiers' words were routine. They stitched quick legality over an act that had been made in a pocket of motion behind the broader performance. The executioner stepped back from the block with oil-stained hands that now carried a new, private stain. The witness slid to her knees beside Kadir and pressed the blade away from his fingers. The warm oil on his skin smelled faintly like the tannery. Her hands shook as she closed his eyes. Around them, the square hummed with the aftershock of expectation without the ritual's intended execution. Soldiers wrapped Kada for a carry. The executioner met her gaze one last time, and his mouth moved in a line that could have been apology or warning you promised, the executioner, meaning the future debt he had asked for. He spoke low so the crowd would not catch it. The witness nodded. Her voice came out small and dry. "We'll find the man at the Eastern Market. I will hand him the linen. I will keep the promise." In that instant another emotion rose, resolve shaped by grief. Fear had pushed her forward. Bargain had kept her breathing. Resolve would keep her moving into the price the executioner named. Soldiers restored order. The emperor did not descend to look at Kada's face. He sat, ink drying on the latest writ, and the gallery dispersed in a murmur that pretended to be satisfaction. The witness let the crowd press her back, and then she moved through them until she stood near the emptying square. The executioner shoved tools back into their hooks and lit a fresh coal, as if the cauldron itself needed tending for the next time the theatre required a body. The captain ordered the procession to march past the emperor's dais. Voices in the crowd tried to make sense of the missing spectacle. The witness heard scraps of speculation. The emperor had mercy, someone had paid, or the writ had been delayed by accident. None of these matched the hard, exact facts in her palm, an oilcloth notepad with ink smudges, and a name that would no longer be called at the cauldron's rim. At dawn, the witness sat at the square's edge with a small notepad in her lap and wrote with a slow, stubborn hand. The city smelled of coal and ash. An overturned wooden stool lay near the edge of the square. The witness catalogued the night's actions with the clinical precision she had learned from watching couriers fold paper and clerks stamp seals. She wrote the time the courier had slammed the sealed writ onto the executioner's bench, the way the executioner had rubbed his palms, the exact words the emperor had used when he commanded the ritual. Her writing was a ledger of choices. She recorded the bargain in short, direct lines, the executioner's debt to Kada, the bargain struck in the antechamber, the captain's tightening of patrols, the emperor's public stamp. Each line read like evidence. She wrapped the notepad in oilcloth and slid it into her satchel. The witness had written so she would remember beyond the official version that would be shaped by seals and public statements. A voice behind her broke the morning hush, thin, factual, removed. The documentary narrator spoke as if cataloguing a specimen. The method of terror relied on ritual certainty, paper authority, and the visible threat of death by boiling. That night, an irregular mercy shortened one life and complicated the state's narrative. The witness did not look up. The voice told facts. It did not change what she had done. Someone else approached, a courier with a folded sheet, and the emperor's private cipher used on a different set of writs. He held it like an offering of routine. The witness took it and scanned the lines. A surprise appeared. Amid the list she found a name she had not expected, the captain who had tightened patrols. The ink showed a correction, a smudge where a hand had altered a line. The witness remembered a tug at the tapestry earlier, a flash when the captain had seized her by the elbow. Now the ledger in her hands made sense of the earlier motion. The captain had moved to expose any delay, perhaps to protect his own place in the ritual sequence. She wrapped the new sheet and placed it inside her satchel with the notepad. A twist had revealed itself. Not only had the executioner once owed Kadir, but the captain had a stake in ensuring the performance ran on time. The witness understood that her acts would ripple differently than she had planned. The executioner had traded a mercy for a future debt. The captain had sharpened the ritual's teeth. The emperor had signed and then looked away. The witness rose and walked to the rim of the cooling iron cauldron. It sat empty now, steam gone, the metal dark with a ring of old black. She ran her gloved fingertips along the rim and felt a smear of ash. The executioner had returned to his tools, and the square's crowd had thinned to a scatter of merchants and lingering onlookers. She placed the small, rusted ladle she had found at her feet and left it there like a signature. The documentary narrator's voice returned, cold and precise. The state's theater of terror functioned on visible procedure. When a private mercy interrupted the pattern, officials chose suppression over explanation. The method survived, but the ledger kept the truth the witness swallowed. The narrator catalogued without moralizing. The witness needed no author to shape her grief into righteous language. She had recorded the facts herself. The witness stepped away from the cauldron and folded the oilcloth around her notepad once more. Her fingers traced the indentation of the ink until skin and paper blurred in a single steady motion. She thought of the executioner's stained hands and Kada's final small movement. She thought of the favor she had promised the linen to the man at the Eastern market, and how the market smelled of damp cloth and fish and wayward coins. Another choice had been placed before her: keep the vow and accept the debt the executioner demanded, or refuse and let her brother become the state's intended example after all. The square emptied. Soldiers closed ranks and moved toward the palace. The witness tucked her satchel closer and began to walk toward the Eastern market to keep a bargain she had not wanted but could not now avoid. Her steps were measured, each one a decision in motion. The executioner returned to his smock and his tools. The captain adjusted his uniform. The emperor resumed his script of impartial authority. The city's mechanisms hummed back into place as if nothing had been altered. At the market, she would meet the man the executioner had named. She would hand him a strip of linen and keep her word. The witness had learned that bargains with men who handled bodies were never clean. They left stains elsewhere. She kept walking because action was the language grief understood now, and because a ledger needed witnesses. Her notepad would be a record for another day, another voice that might one day read the specifics aloud. She paused once more at the square's edge and looked back at the empty iron pot. The sun had climbed enough to make the cauldron's rim glint dully. She put one hand on the metal as if to steady herself and then turned away. The last concrete beat. She tucked the oilcloth-wrapped notepad into the inner seam of her satchel and tightened the strap. Then she moved toward the Eastern market to fulfill the favor and to carry forward the consequences of a mercy that had been bought and paid for in promises. The chapter closes in action. The witness leaves the square with a notepad in oilcloth tucked into her satchel and a promise to the executioner still unfulfilled. The rusted ladle left where choices had been made, and the emperor's writ still wet with the private cipher that meant the state's method would continue. The ledger exists now, a measured account intended to outlast the spectacle and to record a night where a private mercy altered one predicted death but deepened the moral debt of those who watched.